1979's Mission for the Dragon is a Bruceploitation flick that's a 70-30 split between generic martial arts fodder and a rather uninspired murder mystery. I don't want to sell this film short right from the off, but that's basically what you're getting yourself into here. And I wish I could be more polite about this film, because it's actually not that bad. But I need to tell you from the top that if you're looking for a fresh take on the martial arts genre, you'll want to look elsewhere. The film stars Dragon Lee and Carter Wong as Lung Lee and Wong Kwang, sons of two rather highly regarded members of a small village community. When Lee's dad goes to see Kwang's dad for evaluation on a rare statue, it causes a small commotion, as the statue was originally stolen from a holy temple some 10 years previously. After the commotion, the dads go their separate ways, and are immediately stalked by a mysterious masked man in red, who adult naps both dads, taking the statue in the process. A day or so passes and Kwang begins to grow concerned about his father's absence, so he decides to go looking for him with his uncle. At the same time, we then cut to Lung Lee, who's training by a nearby waterfall when he's suddenly attacked and then congratulated by his training master, who informs Lee that the way he handled the attack has now confirmed that he's ready to be a master of the arts himself. Lee is somewhat modest about this, but decides the time is right to head home now that he's completed his training. On the way back, he's attacked by Kwang's men, who wish to take him hostage, as Kwang believes Lee is the person who's kidnapped his father and the statue, as revenge for Kwang's father having called Lee's father a grave robber. The film then devolves into roughly half an hour of "I know you are, but what am I?", as Lee and his fiancée-to-be, Mei Ling, travel around the village and its surrounding area trying to find clues as to the disappearing dad's whereabouts, while Kwang tries to find evidence that it was Lee who did the dad napping. Occasionally, these two storylines cross paths and we're treated to arguing, bickering, and the occasional hostage scene that ends with nothing of consequence happening. Equally, it should also be mentioned at this point that there's another set of players in this scenario, Mr. Kwan and his gang, who are also invested in both sides of this argument. This is because Kwan is brother to Mei Ling and a close family friend of Kwang. He's also got a very shady side, and without going into too much detail, may know more about the disappearing dads than he's letting on. And that's the movie in a nutshell, really. From past experience, I'm beginning to believe that, with notable exception, these particular kind of martial arts movies are terrifically one-note type films, usually involving a single main plot that has a very basic beginning, middle and end, with little to no character development, B-plots or deviation from the path. There may be some occasional random 10-minute breakaway scenes that aren't relevant to the plot at all and don't really build any kind of character development, but that's it. In this movie there are a couple of scenes like that. While the majority of it is based around trying to find the missing dads, there are a couple of strange aside scenes. Like there's a scene in an open-air restaurant where a guy decides he doesn't want to pay for his meal. Lee demands the man pay for his food. There wasn't anything wrong with the meal, the guy just doesn't want to pay for it, and a fight breaks out. And then we cut to the next scene. Nothing else happens relating to that moment and nothing comes from it. It's just the makings of a setup, but with no payoff and no real necessity to set it up at all in the first place. It reminded me a bit of the scene in The Dragon Lives Again, where actor Bruce Lau, playing Bruce Lee, decides to abolish gambling. It just kind of happens, and then nothing really comes of it. There are two major issues with this movie based on the best copy I could find for review, which was the VHS rental version. The first is that the film is heavily cropped, quite a standard issue for this genre of film, but rather than it being pan and scanned or all smushed into the 4:3 ratio, the copy I watched was literally just cropped on the sides, top and bottom. This means that text that's presented on screen can be randomly cut off when it appears towards the edges. After a certain point, credits just run off down past where the screen can display them. It's incredibly annoying because in at least a couple of the scenes, actors are having conversations with other actors who've been cropped out of the shot to the point where their noses and the smallest amount of their faces are visible on screen. There's been no mind for framing, and because of this it makes a lot of the movie look really sloppy in terms of Cinean direction. The other issue is the BBFC. As long-term viewers of my channel will know, the BBFC in the 1980s hated two things: horror films and martial arts movies. Why exactly they had a fixation on wanting to keep these films out of the public's hands, Lord knows. But as a result, it meant every single martial arts movie to be passed through the BBFC was at minimum a 15 and as a standard an 18, regardless of content, narrative or happenstance. And as if to only further add insult to injury, they were almost always cut to shreds as well. This film is no exception. There's little to nothing in this film that should warrant it having an 18 rating. Some infrequent swearing and a couple of fight scenes where a bow staff and throwing stars are used probably should have got this film a 12 rating by modern standards. And that's me being conservative. However, this film was given an 18 rating at the time, and there's a hell of a lot cut out of it, nearly 2.5 minutes worth. As a result, this has impacted the film quite drastically. I can't tell for certain what scenes were cut by the director terribly and which were just terribly cut by the BBFC. There's a lot of jumpy frames in this film, but there are moments where it feels like entire sequences are missing with little to no rationalisation as to exactly why they've been excised. On the Cinean direction? It's okay. There's nothing really astounding about this, and I feel even if I managed to get my hands on an uncropped, pristine version of this film that I still wouldn't exactly be blown away. It's competent filmmaking. It does the job and not much more than that. There are a couple of standout sequences. In particular, there are some scenes in the cave system where they use quite moody coloured lighting and some interesting angles to make things look a bit spooky. But it's very short-lived and there isn't much more of that in the rest of the film. A long, glaring fireplace sequence towards the end is welcome, but all too little too late. The Cine really doesn't go out of its way to give this movie a sense of individuality. Competent is about as good as it gets here. Though the red man who pops up occasionally throughout the film did really remind me of Nicholas Roeg's Don't Look Now, for reasons I won't spoil here. What I can say, however, is that the choreography in the fight scenes are very impressive. There's not a tremendous draw distance on punches and kicks, and they really keep the energy up and pounding from fight to fight. Both Dragon Lee and Carter Wong are naturals in their field, so I wasn't expecting anything less than a fantastic range of choreography, and they really don't disappoint here. With a mixture of melee and armed combat scenes, it's probably the best thing about this movie in all honesty. In fact, on the subject of directorial ownership, there is a bit of a clash in terms of who actually did direct this feature. IMDb claims the film was directed by Si-Hyeon Kim, a director who seemingly specialised in bruceploitation cinema, and worked quite regularly with this film's star Dragon Lee. He hasn't directed anything since 1988, but this film would fit in very nicely with the tone and feel of this director's other works. The BBFC website and the official DVD release, however, for some strange reason, lists the director of this movie as none other than one man's trash is another man's treasure legend, Godfrey Ho. I'll be honest, I don't think this is a Godfrey Ho movie, as it doesn't have the feel that his kind of films generally bring to the table. However, if it was revealed that it was Ho all along, I don't think I could be any more impressed with his already heaving filmography from the time. I feel here that it may have just been the case that someone misentered the details into the BBFC website while they were in the process of moving their analogue records online. There isn't, however, any dispute as to who wrote this one. This was scripted by Young Kyun Lee, who only wrote 2 films. This, and Golden Dragon Silver Snake, a Godfrey Ho movie. Yeah, my head's starting to hurt now too. I don't know how faithful to the script the dub of this movie is, but once again, for the UK release at least, we end up with the cast of Carry On Karate voicing our actors in this one. I don't know where the mentality that people who buy martial arts films want to hear bad impressions of Americans and Kenneth Williams came from, but I certainly am not one of those who appreciates it. It's all very self-aware, very bizarre, and quite sarcastic in the delivery of the lines. The plot itself is fine, but there are plenty of incidents where the translation just can't quite be right, or has been made a little bit too literal, often resulting in actors cutting each other off, or speaking entire sentences without pause when the actor on screen says a single word. I think this is probably one of the worst I've seen for that, in all honesty, and while it does make me laugh on occasion because of how corny the dub is, I don't think that was the full intention of the creators. The soundtrack's solid. It's a mixture of funky 70s filler music and the occasional synth track. One of the things I did notice with this film is that the whoosh sound effects used when our cast members are fighting are entirely generated via a synthesizer, resulting in a rather bleepy bloopy set of effects. It's all a bit unusual, honestly, but I imagine for the time it must have sounded rather impressive. The only other thing of note that I can really mention is the ending, and mild spoilers ahead, so skip to the time on screen now if you'd rather not know. Like many martial arts films I've spoken about and seen, one of the biggest problems these films have is that the film just stops. It doesn't wind down, there's no closure, it's usually just mid-scene. The end credit will pop up and the film will just stop. Here it's ludicrous. So we find out that Kwan is the villain and that he's killed both dads and stolen the statue with the aim of getting rich off it because he feels he deserves it. Lung finds out about this and challenges Kwan to a final battle to the death. It's established in the opening act that Kwan may or may not have poor vision. Seriously, it's sometimes played that he's partially sighted, but then equally it's played as if he's faking having poor vision in order to come across as less suspect. Anyway, in the final fight to the death, Kwan goes to grab a sword, and as he does, Lung pulls off his shirt to reveal he's wearing a vest made entirely of highly polished mirrors. This blinds Kwan, but he still charges at Lung with the sword. He gets to the point of striking when he becomes overwhelmed by the brightness of the mirrors, looks to start falling over, and then the end credit comes up before he even hits the ground. And that's it. As far as endings go, it's beyond underwhelming. It was actually genuinely confusing. At first I thought it might have been another BBFC cut, but no, the film actually just ends like that. It left me frustrated, baffled, and genuinely feeling quite unpleasant. Terribly underwhelming. Mission for the Dragon was released on VHS in 1987 by VPD. As discussed, the print's cropped and heavily edited. But in terms of PQ, this is actually one of the better ones that I've seen. It's pretty stable, and there's only a few incidents of print damage on show. So, good job, I think. It was also released on DVD in 2002 as part of the Hong Kong collection. This version is available to view on YouTube, and in all honesty, it doesn't look much, if at all, better than the VHS release. It's also in a bit of a weird situation where it's out of print, unavailable on Amazon, and quite hard to come by, but at the same time, when it does pop up, it's usually dirt cheap. Can I recommend this movie? Not particularly. If you're a fan of the genre, you'll probably love this one. I mean, I liked it. I just don't think it does anything different from the hundreds of other films in the genre out there. The mystery element isn't nearly as mysterious as it would need to be to keep me invested, and the martial arts are just fairly middle of the road. While there is some more than decent choreography, I just can't recommend hunting this one out. If you see it in the wild going dirt cheap, give it a go, but otherwise,